Hi, my name is Daudi Mugabi and this is Business Mike episode 33. My guest today is the founder of Africa Business JumpStart, Dr. Harnet Bokrezion. In this episode, Dr. Harnet shares some of the growing business opportunities in Africa as well as tips on how to attract investment. All this and more next on Business Mike. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Harnet. Could you briefly tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much, Daudi, for having me today on this Africa Business radio show. I am Dr. Harnet Bokrezion, and I am a coach and a consultant and CEO, founder of Africa Business JumpStart. I empower Africans to make strategic business decisions when it comes to starting a venture in Africa. I support in particular Africans in the diaspora with market entry into Africa.
Wow, that's a very unique business. Prior to this business, what were you doing and what is it that attracted you to start this business?
Yes, I actually come from an international development background. So my entire career I've been working, let's say, in the traditional context of helping Africa. So I have implemented projects and programs in the Horn of Africa in an international development context. So our programs were funded by the likes of UNDP and Oxfam. I also was a consultant for the European Union. And I focused on agriculture, food security. So that is really my background. Now, I always very much enjoyed my job because from a very early age, I wanted to, help Africa and be part of the development of Africa. And let's say the avenues that were available at that time when I finished my university, or that we were familiar with, was NGO work. So this is how I followed the path of international development for Africa. And having said that, although I always enjoyed my work very, very much, I worked a lot with rural communities in the Greater Horn region. There was always this kind of dissatisfaction, witnessing how much money was flowing into such kind of development projects, including our own projects. And I mean, some of them, we received over $250,000 for a couple of years. And when those projects concluded, there was always that question, okay, great. So, but what is the impact we've made? And I always felt that a lot of those in the rural communities in Africa, be it the farmers or the nomads, I worked a lot with nomads, which we call pastoralists or agro-pastoralists. They are entrepreneurs at heart, they are business people at heart. They need to be in order to survive and in order to amend themselves with the given circumstances that always change in Africa, be it politically, be it in terms of climate, and they're very, very resourceful. So I always felt frustrated in the way the international development work went about in trying to empower these communities. And so when I finally, heard about this Africa rising and Africa's renaissance, kind of a new era of a new generation of entrepreneurs, a new generation of businesses coming up in Africa that were very different from the past. So where we often, let's say, connected businesses in Africa or those who made money in Africa with exploitation or dirty politics or egocentric behavior, we find now that obviously not all of them, but we find now that there is a wave of a new generation of African business people who who, they care about sustainability, they care about accountability, they care about making a positive impact towards their communities, and that connected with business. I found that so powerful. I was so inspired by that that I decided to make that shift. And it wasn't an easy shift, because if you are in international development and charity, making that shift towards business and entrepreneurship, it's not an easy shift, especially in your own mindset. It was a learning curve for me personally. But I also realized that making money, even in our own families and communities, sometimes it is not seen as something very positive. And but I realized, when you have actually money, even as an individual, you can help so many more people. I mean, starting from your own family and relatives and your village in Africa, and extending that towards communities you care about. So that's why I made the shift. And it's still a learning curve, but yes, here I am assisting others to do exactly the same, to build successful businesses in Africa.
Well, and I'm guessing that that's exactly what Africa Business JumpStart does for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. What I realized, Daudi, was, you see, a lot of Africans, and that across the globe, be it within Africa and be it in the diaspora, or even those of African descent, a lot of them have a lot of interest. For example, those in the United Kingdom and the United States have a lot of interest in doing business on the continent. But what I found is they feel inhibited. They don't know how to go about it. And as a result of that, they either never move, which means they're losing a lot of valuable time, because Africa is getting more competitive as we speak. The markets are getting visibly more competitive. So as a result of that lack of how do I get started, they either never move or they make hasty business decisions that can dearly cost them. And I've realized that in my own circle of friends and relatives and colleagues. And that this is where I really want to come in to give those very practical strategies, the very practical how-tos.
Right. And one of the reasons as to why people don't want to start businesses in Africa, be it expatriates or people outside Africa, or even the Africans themselves, is because there's a certain perception of business in general in Africa. Have you discovered any misconceptions about business in Africa, and maybe reasons as to why people are negative towards doing business in Africa?
Yeah, I think, Daudi, it can probably be put into two categories. One of it is our own perception, the one that we grew up with, in our families. How was money viewed? And usually money was viewed as something that there's a scarcity of, or it was viewed as something that's bad, or it was viewed as something that others have it, but we don't. And if you grow up in such an environment in your family, even among friends or relatives, you kind of, without realizing, you have a certain template in your mind about money or doing business. And it's a poverty thinking. Even if you have not been poor, your family may have, owned a house, and your dad may have had a good job. But still, always it was about saving, and it was about not enjoying money, or the kind of messages that there was not plentiful of it. It was always a limiting factor. And so it started in our own homes, I think. This is what I certainly realized. I mean, our family was all about education. That's probably how I ended up having a PhD, but it didn't make me wealthy. And so I always wondered why that is. I have all the education that one could dream of, I've grown up in the West. I have personal skills and talents. I'm not a shy person. However, I was always, limited in my monthly income that I received being an employee of a development agency. So it starts from our own personal templates, I think, and it's a big shift one has to make. And the second is obviously, as I touched upon before, doing business in Africa was often associated with dirty money, money that was based on exploiting others or exploiting the poor. And then there's the issue of corruption, which is still very much present in Africa, in some countries much more so than in others. But yes, so these are the perceptions that we have to change, I guess. And I always say, if someone says, doing business in Africa is risky, and I worry about the risk. Obviously, it's true for to a certain amount, to a certain level, but it's also a question of perception, because look at the economic downfall. The economic downfall or slowdown, it occurred in the rich West. Now even China is affected by it. But it occurred, the first round a few years ago occurred in the United States. So how many were there having their safe jobs and their businesses, and suddenly they were struck by a risk they had never foreseen, while Africa or businesses in Africa continue to flourish. And also what we have to see is that the very risks that come with operating in emerging markets, those are opportunities at the same time. This is why Africa has still relatively little competition. This is why Africa has such a great return on investment. When we are looking at return of investment in Africa, we're looking at rates between 15 to 25% return of investment. In some industries or countries, up to 35% return of investment. The global average is 5 to 10%. And in America, I think at the moment it's something like 2 to 5% or something. So it is, you have this high return of investment in Africa, and the reason is because not everyone goes in there, and the opportunities are still huge. And so it's a matter of perspective, what you see as a risk and what you see as an opportunity, I would say. But lastly, yes, there are risks in Africa, and you have to know what they are and how to mitigate them. And that's also part of the work I do when I work together with people.
Right. Now, you mentioned that there are so many businesses on the African continent that are thriving. Could you give us a few examples of particular industries that are doing very well on the continent?
Yes, absolutely. There are many. There are actually many. I would say some of the top industries would be, number one, for example, fast consumer products. So fast consumer products is obviously everything that we use in our daily lives, and including, household products, beauty and hygiene products, clothes, shoes. All those are fast-moving consumer products. So that one is one of the fastest growing sectors in Africa right now. A lot of it gets still imported from outside. So it's all about producing that now in Africa. So that's one. The other one is agriculture. Agriculture, together with fast-moving consumer goods, is, I would say, among the top 2 or 3. So agriculture, obviously, everyone needs to eat in Africa every day, and it's the fastest growing population in the world we have. But not only that, the world is also looking onto Africa. While there's land scarcity in other parts of the world, the world is now looking onto Africa to feed them. So agriculture is often obviously viewed as smallholder farming in Africa. But when you manage to commercialize it, even at a small scale, you can start from small, and you manage to choose the right produce, and you manage to find the right target markets, and then you can do very, very well. And a lot of Africans have done very well. Fast-moving consumer goods, agriculture, real estate, doing incredibly well with it, construction and infrastructure, then health and education. Yeah, I think those are. ICT is doing very well in Africa, especially among the younger generation, and also banking and finance. So I think these are the top industries or top sectors in Africa at the moment.
Right. Now, I'm Ugandan, and our country was ranked as one of the most entrepreneurial country in the world. However, it has a very high mortality rate in terms of businesses failing within the first year. From your experience, what are some of the challenges you've seen businesses have sustaining themselves in Africa?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, first of all, I think it is a very, very positive development that we see such high entrepreneurial activity. And we see that in a lot of African growth countries, which is really to be welcomed, especially among the youth and especially among women, I have to say. So the challenges or the downfalls people face look differently regarding to which groups you're looking at. So let's say the diaspora, for example, makes different mistakes than those based in Africa. But as you're based in Uganda, now let me start with that, with those on the continent. So a lot of mistakes I see, one would be, to come up with an idea because you simply think that's a good idea. Or maybe you've heard from a friend that's a good idea. Or maybe you've heard about someone who is doing it somewhere else or in a different market, and you thought, oh, I can do that too. When generating the idea, a lot of people make personal or emotional decisions, and they make not so much market-driven decisions. So it is very, very important that you look at, in your local context, what are the top industries in the market that I want to enter. And then you choose an industry. Within that industry, what are the biggest needs? What is the biggest demand? What are people struggling with? Africa provides such a great platform for meeting demands and needs. People are, needing something right now, or they have a problem that you could solve. And so that is a market driven approach that not enough people take. And then the second approach, or the second mistake I very regularly observe is a lot of them think too much about the how. So the first thing that will come to their minds is, how will I raise capital? I don't have money. So how do I get funding for this? And this is something I see especially among the many that want to get started in Africa. And obviously, well understood, it's difficult to get something started when you have a lack of capital, and access to finance is very, very difficult in Africa. So I appreciate that challenge, and I recognize the truth in it. However, having said that, you don't get an idea funded. Just because you have a great idea and you think it's a great idea and you have possibly even put that idea onto a business plan, that doesn't get you funded. That doesn't secure an investment or a business loan or any of that. So this is what I get a lot. I have this idea, look, I've researched it, and how can I get that funded, or how can I find investors? Well, the truth is the majority of you won't, because investors don't invest into an idea or a business concept on paper. Very, very rare that that ever happens. So let me give you a very practical example. What investors would invest in. I've met a Somali lady in Kenya, and I'm bringing her example because I think it really demonstrates what is attractive to investors. So she, for example, she visited a trade show in Nairobi, and she met those exhibitors that came from somewhere Northern Europe, Balkan states, and who were presenting organic fertilizers for agriculture. And so she loved the product and what it could do. And these fertilizers were very special because they came from the bottom of the lakes, and they were brought up all the way from the bottom of the lakes and turned into fertilizers. Now she actually tried out. I think she received like a little sample. She liked the product so much that, and yes, she borrowed some money from her family. She traveled to those states in the Balkan to find out more about how they did it, how they extracted it, and so on. And she came back with a few samples, and she tried them out on with coffee farmers in Kenya, and she realized that they had like triple the yield within a year or something. And they could see first improvements after 6 months. And you just need a tiny amount of that. So then she asked for investors. She had it all analyzed locally and so on. Then she asked for investors, because she made a case. She had put a lot of her personal her time, her energy, she had put that in. She had made the journey. She has tried it out. And that's investable because she has a proven concept. But not only that, investors, they invest in people. And she has proved to them that she's a go-getter, that she has perseverance, that she's ready to sacrifice. And so after doing that for a year, she looked for investors, and she has a very strong case. So I hope that shows you what has to be done in order to become investable. But maybe, Daudi, if I may, obviously the question will come. So, but how do I get that started? I mean, how do I get even the flight to the Balkans? Yeah, like if I have no money, right?
Yes.
Well, you see, fact of the matter is that a lot of the African entrepreneurs that are hugely successful right now and that are featured across media have started with nothing. They have started on $100 or now I have actually featured some of their stories on my website, africajumpstart.com. And maybe to give you another example, 2 sisters in South Africa, they, one had a baby and she was looking for organic cream, or she didn't like the products. Now she started in her own kitchen, mixing something together, buying little bottles, putting stickers on it and so on. And she started that with her sister, all organic, getting the ingredients from some farmers and shops and so on. And they started to mix it in their kitchen together. And then a trade show came up, and they said, we have to get the word out there. So they mixed into the night for 100 bottles. I think they put the bottles out there. Everything was sold on day one. So they went back home because the trade show was 2 days, and they started mixing up in their kitchen again, and now, I mean, this is, I think, 3-4 years ago. They are producing for major department stores in South Africa. It's on the shelves of, I don't know, Woolworths and whatever, I don't know exactly the names of those local department stores, but they are doing very, very well. So there are a lot of Africans who have started in their bedrooms, in their kitchens, and have started small and grown it from there. It's absolutely possible.
Right. So you mentioned that there are some challenges in starting a business. For those that actually have the money available to start their businesses, be it being African or people that are in the diaspora, how easy is it to start a business in Africa in terms of the logistics and paperwork? And how does it vary from one country to another?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, this is exactly a problem for many. We all know Africa has 54 countries. They all vary very, very much in terms of, business climate and so on. So there's absolutely not one answer for Africa. You really have to look at those various countries. So let me try to put it into categories, or the way how you would be able to go about it. In first choosing your market and then looking at the pros and cons. So first of all, you have 54 countries. Among those 54 countries, there's also only a certain number of markets that are growth markets, high growth markets. So, there's the obvious choices. Let's say there's South Africa and Nigeria and Kenya. And then you have other high growth markets in East Africa, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda. You have in the West, you have, Ghana, Ivory Coast. You have Angola, DRC, Mozambique. I mean, Botswana, Zambia. I mean, these are, and I haven't mentioned it, but these are the high growth markets. Now, what I still see is Africans choosing markets that are not high growth markets, possibly because they have some personal attachment to those markets, or because they know someone in government and they feel like, or they have some kind of contact there with another business and they feel like that contact could help them to get started. But I would certainly say if you can be flexible and you have the choice, you are going to increase your success rate by choosing a high growth market, number one, and not a lower growth market, number one. So let's say then you have your list with your high growth markets. And first of all, usually the way I advise people to go about it is, now choose your industry. When people have already an idea what kind of industry they're interested in because they have an experience or a particular interest, or they have already a business in that particular industry elsewhere. So choose an industry. Now, among these high growth markets, in which of those is your industry doing very, very well? Because again, not each industry is a growth industry or very dynamic industry in those growth markets. So among those growth markets, which ones are fostering for your industry or have currently a lot of dynamic going on in your industry into which to tap into? So you have another list now, because you don't want to, even if there is a high growth market, if your industry is either overly competitive in that market already, or not really functional, or it's just not a growing trend that is visible, then don't choose that market. Then again, so you have that list now. So among those, now you can decide. You have a list of a high growth market, and also your industry is doing well in those markets. Now, the other thing you want to look at is, how prepared are you to take risk? How much perseverance do you have? So there comes the aspects of the ease of doing business in those markets. And then there also comes the aspects okay, how large are these markets? Some of them are very large and some of them are very tiny. Now, for a big company, let's say, it doesn't make much sense to go into a very, very small market. But for an aspiring entrepreneur, it may actually be easier to go into a smaller market that is much more easily overlooked. So you look for ease of doing business in those markets. And there's huge discrepancies. So you have very, very difficult markets, high growth markets, but very, very difficult. For example, Angola, DRC, even Nigeria. It is very difficult to do business, or even Ethiopia. It's difficult to do business in those markets, especially when you are not personally attached. This means you haven't grown up in those markets or you haven't lived in those countries. So these are difficult ones. And then you have some where doing business in is very, very easy compared, relatively, obviously speaking. So, for example, there is Rwanda, there is Botswana, there is Ghana, there is South Africa, where the environment of providing like a positive business environment. So I think in closing, what I can say is there are high risk markets in Africa. There are high opportunity markets in Africa. There are low risk markets in Africa, and there are low opportunity markets in Africa. So your best bet is to get a high opportunity, low risk market and to go as much as possible towards that.
And you've obviously come across so many businesses. So could you tell us some of the remarkable businesses that you've come across that perhaps wouldn't be considered anywhere else in the world?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, loads of them. But loads of remarkable businesses, I have to say, lots of them. But if you say that you don't come across anywhere in the world, I mean, that's really difficult, because most of it can somehow be, replicated or has been in existence somewhere else in a different local context. But if you want one, typical Africa, ostrich farming, for example. There's also someone who has become a millionaire by doing that. We usually think of chickens or, pig farming or something like that. But ostrich farming, obviously the bird is available in Africa, not all over Africa, but in a lot of countries. And it provides an amazing amount, just one bird, of meat and leather or skin that you can produce leather from. So that's something actually countries like Namibia and Botswana are really trying to push forward at the moment.
Right. Well, thank you so much for all the insight you've given us. For people who want to get in touch with you and basically learn more about how they can start a business in Africa, can you just walk us through the process as to what happens when someone gets in touch with you in order to start a business in Africa?
Yes, sure, Dowdy. It would be a pleasure. First of all, you will find me on africajumpstart.com. africajumpstart.com is my blog, and you have my contact details there. Also, how you can book me. That's usually for aspiring businesses, aspiring entrepreneurs, or small business owners. I also provide services to actually already existing companies. So those who want to either expand into different markets within Africa, or companies based in the US, especially in the US and UK and Germany, who want to enter the African market. So I have another website called drharnet.com. So that's drharnet.com. But you can find me on Africa JumpStart. And I do provide one-to-one, consultation session, coaching sessions. So they are very popular. But they're for people who want to walk the walk. I also get a lot of emails with questions. It has reached a stage where I can hardly keep up with it. And I'm trying my best always to help even quickly with an email, to give some advice or tips. but it has become very difficult to follow up with that because I'm receiving so many. And for the first time, we have the book 101 Ways to Make Money in Africa. That is over 300 pages and really is a very practical book. It introduces you right into, the top industries. It shares success stories, how other Africans have done it. It provides practical tips on how to go about it, what to take care of, the business niches that are not packed yet that you could enter. That book has become very popular among Africans in the diaspora as well as on the continent. It's available at an ebook format, and you can get that on www.africa101book.com. So that's africa101book.com. So for 101 ways, yeah. And lastly, maybe Daudi, for the first time, I will step into, and actually I had a live seminar in London this year, and I will expand on that. But I will focus on the African diaspora in the UK and in particular in the United States. So I will have my first Africa Business JumpStart boot camps, very intensive training camps for over 2 to 3 days in DC and California, Silicon Valley, around San Francisco next year, starting in March.
Right. And where can we get the details specifically for the dates and locations?
Well, just follow my website. I will publish them probably around the New Year and also make special New Year offers, because New Year is usually, the time when we all step out with new motivation. So I want to make special offers to for people who had it maybe in their mind and they just don't know how, they have tried and failed and lost motivation. And I want to offer them to work with me. I want to offer them to invest in their learning process, because once you know how, you won't repeat many of the mistakes and you won't run into many of the challenges. And so it will be a very practical session and a training boot camp, and you will find all the details on my website and also other channels that will cooperate with me. Just follow africajumpstart.com. Around the New Year, I will announce it.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Harnet. All the details you've mentioned, your website, the book link, as well as all the ways we can get in touch with you, I'll definitely put them on your show notes page. And if you'd like to know what that is businessmike.com/Dr. Harnet. That is where you'll find all the information we've discussed today. So thank you once again, Dr. Harnet, and we wish you all the very best in your endeavors.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure, and I wish all of us all the best.
Thank you so much for listening to Business Mike today. And if you'd like to listen to more episodes just like this one, simply go to businessmike.com. I would love to hear from you. So if you've got any questions or suggestions about the show, simply drop me an email at daudi@businessmike.com. Thanks again for listening, and until next Monday, take care.